Coney Island is a magical place. It's a legend, it's an attitude. Coney Island is a state of mind.
For more than 125 years, Coney Island has been the people's playground.
You walked out of the train and bingo, there you are, Magic Land.
Coney was the birthplace of nighttime illumination, the nickel hot dog, the world's first thrill rides, and the granddaddy of all sideshows.
Coney Island absolutely revolutionized the way Americans played.
But Coney Island is not just a simple seaside fun zone. It has reflected social change in the United States, both the good and sometimes the not so good.
What happens in Coney Island stays in Coney Island.
Stretching for 5 miles along the southernmost shore of Brooklyn, Coney Island holds a special place in the hearts of many New Yorkers.
Everyone has a favorite at Coney Island. For some, it's the historic boardwalk. For others, it might be the mermaid parade, the hot dog eating contest, or the cyclone. But each of those is only a small part of the story of the place where modern American amusement was invented over 100 years ago.
Before it became the birthplace of American leisure, Coney Island was just a prime piece of oceanfront real estate.
In the largest city in the Western Hemisphere, it's the nearest beach. Coney Island is magical geography.
When early Dutch settlers landed in this part of New York in the 1620s, wild rabbits swarmed the dunes. They called these rabbits canyons and named the island after the pests.
For nearly 200 years, Coney Island was a sleepy seaside community where farmers would graze their cattle and harvest oysters and clams. But by the mid-1800s, a number of entrepreneurs saw Coney Island's potential as a seaside resort destination, and a race to develop Coney Island was on.
As New York's population expanded, people needed a place to get away from the city.
Lower Manhattan is the most crowded slum in the world, about twice as crowded as Dickensian London. And you're wearing these indestructible wool suits around at the height of the summer. There was very little relief.
Around the time of the Civil War, horse-drawn trolleys were making the 5.5-mile trip to Coney Island from Prospect Park. Later, steamship and rail service transported working and middle-class Manhattanites desperate to escape the summer heat. Entrepreneurs built simple waterfront restaurants and bathhouses along the shore.
And it's, pretty basic fun. They build bonfires at night and dance around them and eat these sumptuous seafood dinners.
But it didn't take long for hustlers and hooligans to realize that wealthier day trippers were coming to Coney Island from Manhattan and Brooklyn.
The New York Times referred to Coney Island as Sodom by the Sea. For gambling, for three-card Monte, for prostitution, for political corruption.
Coney was presided over by a crooked political boss, John Y. McCain, who took kickbacks while he turned a blind eye to the rampant crime.
John McCain did not necessarily create the corruption at Coney Island. John McCain was just a political boss who knew how to take advantage of it once it happened.
Reformers tried to fight the blight by constructing grand resort hotels, fancy fish houses, and pricey racetracks to lure higher-paying customers.
Around 1880, a number of beautiful hotels and bathing pavilions were built at Coney Island. These resorts were the pinnacle of luxury and fashion for their time.
From the late 1800s until 1914, Coney Island was a seaside paradise where people came dressed in their Sunday best, in search of ocean breezes, high spirits, and maybe a naughty thrill.
Coney Island transcended social boundaries, and that helped to change the fabric of American society.
The end of the 19th century brought the Industrial Revolution to America. New labor regulations meant workers had a mandated day off, some for the first time in their lives.
And you do have extra money, and in a democracy with a growing middle class, You can vote with your wallet on how you want to spend your leisure time.
But not everyone welcomed the emerging power of this new middle class.
Even before the great parks were built, there were many critics who were concerned about the way classes mixed, people mixed, and this was something entirely new.
As more immigrants arrived in New York, mass entertainment became more visual and physical, catering to an eager audience that didn't always speak English.
At the same time, the public's imagination is becoming captivated by a future that includes light bulbs, automobiles, and flying machines. And Coney Island's pioneers had the idea to take all of these scientific advancements and make them fun.
Between 1897 and 1904, 3 competing amusement meccas were built on Coney Island.
Steeplechase, Luna Park, Dreamland, these were the most mythologized fantasy spaces in the world.
These 3 iconic amusement parks drew tens of millions of visitors to Coney Island each summer. And this was at a time when New York City's entire population was only 4.5 million people.
The first park, and the one that lasted the longest, was the brainchild of Coney Island local George C. Tillieu.
George C. Tillieu essentially by himself invents the amusement business.
Tillieu's Steeplechase Park opened in time for the summer of 1897.
And Steeplechase was really the first thing we would think of today as an amusement park.
He puts it all together on a piece of property. It's pay one price admission, and it's nothing but entertainment and physical activity.
Steeplechase's logo is very disturbing, this kind of huge smile, you know.
The hair, which has this devilish quality, as if the whole point is to bring out the devil in everyone who enters Steeplechase.
Tillieu took the machines of industry, gears, tracks, and pulleys, and transformed them into machines of fun.
Its main attraction was the Steeplechase ride, which were these mechanical horses, which went on this sort of undulating rail course all around the rest of the amusement park.
But the Steeplechase fast became legendary for the slightly scandalous contact the riders enjoyed.
The man sits in the front saddle, the woman sits behind the man, and for the sake of not falling off the ride, she has to put her arms around the young gentleman she's just met.
Such forward public displays with a stranger were considered nearly criminal in those days, but at Steeplechase, almost anything was acceptable.
At the end of the Steeplechase ride, there was a rather mad-looking dwarf who would chase after you and whack you with this cattle prod. And there were these jets from these blowholes that would blow up women's skirts.
Steeplechase was irreverent. It was a melting pot. It was a rags to riches story. And these were the types of social changes taking place more broadly throughout the United States, which meant that Coney Island was, in a sense, ahead of its time.
Steeplechase's success inevitably inspired imitators.
In 1903 and 1904, 2 new rival parks arrived at Coney Island, which brought lofty aspirations and incredible architecture to awestruck audiences. The first of these was Luna Park.
Luna Park sprung from the imaginations of Frederick Thompson and Skip Dundee. When it opened after 9 months of construction, Luna Park was a jaw-dropping visual feast.
A genuine fantasy land where reality had no place.
It's all these sort of surreal buildings. They're colored very brightly. They're painted orange and bright white and red.
Those towers and minarets and rides that are all lined with incandescent bulbs take on this magical, transporting quality.
At Luna Park, you can really see the beginnings of Disneyland.
Between the gardens, rides, and roaming entertainers were vivid recreations of imaginary voyages, like a trip to the moon, or real-life events, like the Johnstown flood.
You have animals everywhere. You have camel rides. You have these diving elephants. It was quite amazing.
One of the most popular attractions at Luna Park was known as Fire and Flames.
This was this tenement house that they would set on fire a couple times a day.
For people living in a tenement afraid of fires, it becomes a show in Coney Island watching acrobats jumping out of buildings that pretend to be on fire.
And they would either leap to safety or they would be rescued by heroes on high ladders. It was all very exciting. In a time before television and newsreels, seeing these events that you read about in the paper actually taking place in front of you with guaranteed happy endings was very empowering to people who otherwise felt insignificant in their daily lives.
They were going out and seeing themselves. They were seeing how they lived.
By amusing the millions, showmen became tycoons within a single summer season. A group of investors led by former New York State Senator William Reynolds wanted in on the action, and in 1904 opened the last great park of the Golden Era, Dreamland.
It was a kind of fairyland of whiteness and lights, with the beacon tower about 300 feet tall in the center.
Dreamland was little more than a more expensive copy of Luna Park's greatest hits.
Dreamland, for as regal and majestic as it was, wasn't necessarily that much fun.
Dreamland had inspiration in morality and in Bible studies. You can see Adam and Eve. You can see God creating the universe, all for the price of a ticket at Dreamland.
The flip side to Dreamland's pious pageantry was a bizarre collection of live human exhibits.
You know, these peoples were really badly exploited, but people couldn't get enough of them.
By today's standards, the practice of displaying human beings for entertainment value is shocking. But at the time, most performers didn't consider themselves victims.
Although there are exceptions, frequently they're not only paid well, they have an alternative to staying home, being hidden in their community. So thus sideshows were born.
Technology exhibits were also wildly popular at both Luna Park and Dreamland. These installations gave a mind-boggling glimpse into the world of the future.
The incubators were one of the more humane and benign human exhibits.
Folks could pay 10 cents to visit Dr. Martin Coney's Infantorium and peer through the glass at premature babies on loan from local hospitals.
That invention comes from Coney Island when the medical practice would not support the innovation of incubators.
You could go in and see the literal fight for life. There's some amazing number. I think it's like out of 8,000 babies, like 7,500 lived. He was for real.
A boom in engineering was making mechanical rides safer yet more hair-raising.
We had all these amazing inventions coming out, all these amazing new mechanical devices. Roller coasters were really the aristocrat of the amusement park.
At one point, there were 7 manufactured amusement rides in Coney Island in the early 1900s. So the first new attractions were tested in Coney Island before they went all over the world.
Taking a wonderful bit of mechanical genius and adjusting it to fun, which was something that hadn't been done that much in America yet.
By the 1920s, crude early coasters gave way to towering wooden structures with dizzying drops and hairpin curves.
Mechanical rides went through a boom period, but when you think of the quintessential Coney Island roller coaster, you think of the Cyclone.
The Cyclone skeleton was fabricated from 233,000 linear feet of lumber, and its wooden rails were clad in 240 tons of steel. The first drop was 85 feet, which accelerated the cars to a top speed of 60 miles per hour along 2,640 feet of sharply banked turns. When it opened in 1927, the Cyclone was a masterpiece of continuous, terrifying fun.
Even though the Cyclone wasn't featured in one of the parks, it quickly became Coney Island's best-known attraction.
One of Coney's biggest contributions to the early 20th century was the introduction of light, and therefore life, after sundown.
Americans would travel to New York to vacation and, of course, visit Coney Island. Those people had their first exposure to light bulbs in Coney Island, and not one light bulb lighting up a room, but a city that glows at night.
That blaze of electricity transformed the way Americans played because it extended leisure far into the night.
More than 250,000 individual Edison incandescent light bulbs traced the Byzantine contours of Luna Park. At Dreamland, they boasted of 1 million.
The Scientific American estimates in 1910 that there was enough electricity generated at Coney Island to power an American city of 500,000 people. And this is in America still. We didn't have electricity at all in huge parts of the country.
The brilliant light earned Coney the poetic nickname City of Fire. But that label also appropriately described the devastating blazes that would engulf Coney again and again, and ultimately mark a turning point. In the early morning hours of July 28, 1907, a carelessly tossed cigar ignited a fire at Steeplechase. All but a handful of attractions were destroyed. As the sun rose to reveal the disaster, a shattered George Tillieu proved his showmanship was still intact when he posted a sign.
To inquiring friends, there was a lot of trouble yesterday that I have not had today. And there's lots of troubles today that I did not have yesterday. On this site will be erected a bigger, better Steeplechase Park. Admission to the burning ruins, 10 cents.
Tillieu did rebuild and reopened 8 months later, but 4 years after that, an overnight fire spread unchecked across Dreamland. Dreamland's owners cut their losses and walked away from the charred remains, selling the land back to the city at a tidy profit. At the same time, Luna Park's leadership was hobbled by Skip Dundee's death and Frederick Thompson's compulsive spending. The park was taken over by creditors in 1912, never recapturing the glory that made it famous.
It's fascinating to realize just how short Coney's golden era really was. In a span of just a little over a decade, these 3 iconic parks became as well known as the Eiffel Tower in Paris or even the pyramids of Egypt. But just as quickly as they rose to fame, they faded.
By 1923, Coney Island was reborn, and its attractions discovered this time by a different crowd.
Instead of being an upper-class resort, it becomes a middle-class resort. Why does that happen? Because in 1923, the subway gets to Coney Island.
You walked out of the train and bingo, there you are, Magic Land. And I think because of the subways and ease of transportation, that opened up the availability of Coney Island as a place that really folks of every income level can enjoy.
Also in 1923, the newly constructed boardwalk granted the first public access to the once privately controlled shoreline. People flocked to bask, to bathe, to see and be seen. Coney's refinement and charm was replaced by cut-rate pricing and surging crowds.
So just like the subway is a nickel, the hot dog is a nickel, the rides drop their price from 10 cents to a nickel, and they start working on volume.
Coney became known as the Nickel Empire.
The top weekend crowds before World War I were about 300,000 in a day. After World War I, you routinely get crowds of over 1 million.
In Coney's second golden era, things got faster, louder, weirder. Silent films had captured massive audiences with sight gags and shock. Coney Island followed Hollywood's lead and elevated the so-called freak show from the back alley to center stage.
If every 5 minutes somebody eats fire or hammers a nail into their head or swallows a sword, it's entertaining even if you don't understand the jokes.
By the 30s, even cheap thrills took a big hit, and the People's Playground fell on hard times. Crooked midway games and tacky attractions became the main event.
None of these places now really have, a narrative. You have much more of a kind of honky-tonk feel. You had more freak and geek shows, and this idea of it being some greater thing is given up.
The crowds returned for a while after the Second World War, but in the 50s and 60s, something changed.
Television starts to kind of really take away from the audience of Coney. People stay at home and watch television. People have enough money to go away. They can go out on this brand new highway system they start building in the Eisenhower administration. So this all starts to cut into the popularity of Coney, but Coney is really murdered as much as it dies.
Some point to legendary New York City urban planner Robert Moses as the architect of Coney's demise.
Robert Moses believed in healthy outdoor recreation and none of this riffraff and popular culture and hawking people for money. That was all too unrefined for Robert Moses.
That starts to take away and destabilize the communities around there. He starts to put up these public housing places where he just warehouses people. It becomes poorer.
Urban flight and urban problems and challenges, of course, impacted Coney Island as it did most urban centers in America.
Simmering racial tensions boiled over and drove the longtime residents away.
There are private developers out there too, including one Fred Christ Trump, who plays a major role in this.
Robert Moses made it possible for Fred Trump to purchase the land where Steeplechase operated until 1964. Then, as part of a publicity stunt, Trump enlisted help to make the fragile building impossible to landmark.
He invites out various celebrities and whoever he knows, and he has these bikini-clad models there who hand out bricks to everybody. They smash it to pieces, and then the next day the bulldozers move in and tear down the whole thing.
But Trump couldn't get the permits to build luxury seaside housing towers on the site. In 1969, he sold the land to the city of New York for $3.7 million, pocketing more than $1 million profit. By the 1970s, Coney had a dark, dangerous reputation to match the landscape.
Although you still have days where there are 1 million people in Coney Island, you have a lot of gangs. It is not so much family appropriate anymore.
We went through some tough times as a city. Some people chose to flee, and some drew the line and said that we're not giving up this borough and we're not giving up the city.
It took decades, but by the late 70s, signs of life rippled through the old Coney.
One of the advantages it had, like so many things in 1970s New York, was that it was really cheap, and you could attract creative young people.
I'm an artist by training, and I went there 37 years ago, and for the most part, I haven't left. There's just an imagination in Coney Island that is astonishing, and artists look to that for inspiration and find inspiration there.
By the 1990s, mermaid parades, hot dog eating challenges, history museums, and film festivals took their place in Coney Island's legacy, alongside Steeplechase, Luna Park, and Dreamland.
The bad old days of Coney Island were a lot of fun if you lived through them. I had survived for decades and I had my place in it. And then suddenly everything changed and dreams are coming true.
Not far from where the original Luna Park once stood, a reimagined Luna Park began to rise in 2008.
It was an amazing opportunity for us to be able to reinvent Coney Island, but at the same time, an amazing challenge to really make it happen.
In 2011, the Italian amusement giant Zamperla also took on the refurbishment and operation of the 84-year-old Cyclone.
We were able to find some original drawing, or as close as possible to the drawing, and with some expert in our industry, we look at the possibility to retrack the coaster to make it very similar to what it used to be 9 years ago.
A smooth track was fit into the iconic wooden exterior, upgrading the ride but not sacrificing the playful sense of peril.
It's a coaster that, with the newer standard that we have in our industry, cannot be reproduced. So if a ride has acceleration speed, it was always a winner.
Although a century has passed since the peak of Coney Island's popularity, If you know where to look, you can still find the kind of maverick attitude that made the place possible. One of Coney's cherished traditions still thrives on stage, more than 50 times a week in the summer at Coney Island, USA.
Look, it's showtime, Coney Island! Get your...
When I tell people that I'm a fire eater at the Coney Island Circus Sideshow, I usually get, oh my God, that's amazing.
They're all real. They're all alive on the inside.
What I do is a belly. It's a little show outside the sideshow to get you interested in coming in.
It's not how you fit, it's like what you do to get into the racket.
This place is like very magical. I definitely feel like I found my tribe coming here.
I just want to represent everything about this whole tradition.
In my now 4 decades of being an advocate for sideshows, there's been a tremendous shift. The word freak no longer being a pejorative, but a badge of honor. And believe me, they are rock stars these days.
Looking at Coney Island today, the kind of fame and prestige it once commanded can seem like an urban legend. Although Coney's history is mostly preserved in picture postcards, today's New Yorkers know Coney's appeal is timeless.
I think if we're to have a society where we're not simply looking at our video screens the whole time, we need to have amazing places like Coney where everyone can come together.
Brooklyn is a state of mind, and Coney Island is the fun house.
I like to think that it finally, in the past year, hit a critical mass. We have as many rides now as we did before things changed and old attractions were demolished, and happy the changes happened.
So the same way that you can tear down statues after a regime falls, you can try to efface the physical representation of Coney Island at any given point in time, but the idea will always endure.
Coney Island, it is not just a strip of sand in Brooklyn. It is a seminal place in the American imagination and helped to change the fabric of American society.